Record. The floor is yours. Oh, and you are still muted.
I am. It's been a day. Good evening, folks. This is Vanitha. I'm physically in St. Louis. I'm not in a fancy restaurant. That's just a virtual background. I'm in a corner in my bedroom. So that's where I am. So who am I and what am I doing here and why are we having this session? Quick blurb about myself. I am a TA for two successive cohorts with LC 101. I also mentor and volunteer in launch code programs, and I have many friends who have graduated from launch code programs and have been gainfully benefited. So this program is close to my heart, and I am an advocate for the cause that this program's behind. That's my launch code connection. And outside of it, which is my main job, my day job, I used to work at Chartered Communications Spectrum to most of you until last month. Now I am not locally employed. I work for a company called ThoughtWorks as a principal consultant, that is, and that is all over the country. So I work for a company that's all over the country, but physically still in my bedroom, just a different laptop. I have 15-ish years of experience writing code and doing everything around code. I design systems, I architect systems, but at heart, I'm a developer. I love mentoring, I love teaching, and I love being an advocate for developers, meaning I write a lot of documentation, I do lunch and learn sessions for people at work, things of that nature. So that's about me. And why this guest lecture, right? I don't think we have ever had a guest lecture on this subject. So why this? So like I told, I have TA'd two cohorts. So I have seen students through placement programs, through internship, through interviews, whether it's via launch code or on their own. On the other hand, I've also recruited people, right? I write job description, I know what's expected of a bootcamp graduate, of a junior developer, things of that nature. Most times when someone claims to be a full stack developer or claims they have experience or learned on their own to be a full stack developer, that they can write web services and APIs, or even other skills for that matter, a QA, a UI UX developer, or someone on the data side, people generally start veering into API territory, and it's like, hey, have you ever used Postman, right? That question almost always comes up, as far as I know. Either they want to see it in your resume, or you see it in the job description, or inevitably comes in an interview. I've seen students trip with that question, meaning they weren't familiar with it. And it's a ubiquitous tool. Everybody uses it. So I noticed a gap, and that's why we are here. That's why I'm here talking about Postman. It's a widely used tool. It's a very simple skill to pick, like 1 hour will give you a good grasp on what exactly it is, and it'll have a huge benefit in your job search or your day one in job, where someone throws a tool at you and say, hey, can you check this API? So that's why I'm here giving you all a guest lecture, just so I get the lay of the land. Is everyone from St. Louis or different cities, or you all LC 101 or data code camp folks, women plus folks? Just type in the chat just so I know my audience. That's all. That's what I want to know. So good evening, everybody. Let me start sharing my screen while you type away your answers. Chat's good. Okay, LC 101, yay, St. Louis area. Liftoff, yay, I Philly, DC. Nice. So we have a mix of audience here. Nice to know. I see some familiar faces too, so that's fantastic. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Right. Do you all see my browser?
Yep.
Yep. All right, cool. So general housekeeping. Let me start the slideshow. And housekeeping. I have this hideous violet color mouse pointer. It helps me drive the conversation because I don't have a marker in hand and we are not physically sitting in the same room. So this hideous purple marker is for your visual attention. All right. So I have better taste than that, but it's just to get your attention. And if you have questions, every 10 to 15 minutes, I plan to take a pause, check the chat, or if you have questions, raise your hand. Maybe Lexi can keep an eye on it. So we'll take many breaks so that we have questions answered. I'm not a big fan of saving all questions up until the end. I want them addressed as and when questions come up. So feel free to raise your hand, type a question in chat, or just talk it out. I'm certain all of you are unmuted or can unmute yourself when needed. So go for it. Let's try to make it collaborative. I know this is not exactly a happy hour kind of situation where everyone talks fluently and in a friendly manner because there's this alcohol component. It's a very dry subject, but let's try to make it interesting. If you have a question, just ask. There's no such thing as silly question or simple question or stupid question. So, oh, you can't unmute yourself. All right, noted. Raise your hands and Lexi's gonna unmute you. Awesome, perfect. So that's what we are gonna do. That's my housekeeping notes. Yeah, so what is this? What is Postman? I'm sure if you Google, this is probably the first thing that comes. Even the traditional meaning of Postman is kind of past Google these days. So this little logo that you see here, that's the tool. If you see this anywhere, you know it's Postman. It's a alien flying somewhere. Yeah. So it's an API platform. What's an API platform, right? API is it stands for application programming interface. We'll get to it later in the next slide. Platform in general is it's the English word platform. You build something on top of it, right? So Postman is a tool or a platform, meaning a bunch of systems put together so you and I can play around with APIs. This is not writing API code. That's entirely something else. This is just a testing platform or a request platform, meaning someone wrote an API. I just want to call it and see what kind of response I get with the API. That's all, right? You're not writing code here. Think of it as a testing platform, though the definition of testing is very loose in this case. So that's what Postman is. It's a tool. It's not something that you code. It's a software that you get to use when you work with APIs. All right, everyone good so far? I take silence. I say yes. So what exactly is an API? You can't work with Postman without knowing what an API is, right? API is an acronym for Application Programming Interface. Let's just pick one word here, right? Interface. What is an interface? Interface is something that gives you an option, a way to interact with something complex or something even simple, right? I'm a big fan of this kind of presentation where it's not 100 bullet points, but just pictures. So it sticks here, works for me. I hope it works for you all. Think of a car ignition, right? Keys. Most of us do not know the internals of the car. Me, for one, I can't even change my tires if it becomes flat. But we do not know what the engine does. We do not know how the fuel is converted into something that moves your car, right? We do not know the internals. All we know is car keys, or these days push press, and your car starts. So that's your interface. Someone built something super complicated, and you as an end user, driver in this case, just gets that one interface, which is the key and the keyhole, right? Same way with this one. Does this look familiar to anyone? The second picture with the suitcase-ish thing. You can type your answer in chat if you're very curious to answer the question. But if it's not very obvious, it's the nuclear football, right? It's the nuclear, I don't want to call it detonator. It's something that gets carried along with the president when he moves around the country or outside of the country, so he can make decision to launch a nuclear weapon, right? Hasn't happened ever, or maybe it has. No, I don't think so. But this is an interface to a very, very complicated nuclear system sitting somewhere, and the president doesn't have to know the insides of it. All he gets is an interface. So that's what interface means. In our context, what do we mean by an application programming interface? It's like interface, yeah, what's an application programming interface? It simply means someone wrote a super complicated piece of code using any programming language, right? You can practically write interface for any program, Java, Python, JavaScript, any of it. Programming language doesn't matter. You write a complicated piece of code, and then you kind of expose it to whoever wants to consume it. For example, how many of you have weather apps on your phone? I'm sure almost all of us have, like AccuWeather, weather.com. But not every website or every app that gives this weather report run their own satellite up there, right? There are a limited number of satellites, and these are just interfaces. Someone wrote a complex piece of program that can interpret all the weather data and give it in a form that the front end or the app on the phone on our hand is able to display, right? So that is what an application programming interface means. A complex program, and you as an end user or an end developer or a quality analyst person gets to use in order to get the response without knowing the insights of it, right? That's what API means. A very popular meme that many of my students seem to get much better than like 15 minutes of explaining what an API is, this restaurant analogy, right? You have a whole bunch of people cooking food in the back end and all your customers eating in a nice table somewhere. Your APIs are what gets food to you. You as a customer eating at a restaurant have no idea how food is cooked or who is cooking or how it's plated, none of it. You just get the food. APIs are like servers that get that information or that content to you, right? That's what APIs are. You do not have to be a developer to use API. You'll be a developer if you're writing API, if you're writing the code that says, hey, when someone asks me this information, return this to that person. That, yes, developer does. But to just use an API, you don't have to write code. There are many ways to use an API, and Postman is just one way to do it. Any questions? I don't see any raised hand, unless I'm missing something. Like, see if I'm glossing over someone's question, just feel free to stop me. All right, so who should know about API? Now we kind of know what an API is. Who should know about it? Is it just a developer tool, or is it something a testing person should know? No, not really. In today's world, everyone has to know what an API is. Developer should know if they are the ones writing the actual API, writing the underlying web service and all the logic to get the data from the backend of it. So developers absolutely will know. It's almost like ABCs. Most developers will eventually come to know what an API is, and they'll be the ones building the APIs. UI UX developers, they will also be exposed to API because we build all these complex UI UX, the screens, the app windows, your portfolio for a website, all of it. But the information's got to come from somewhere. Not all of it is static information, right? Some of it's dynamic information. For example, hey, on my personal website, post what I tweeted yesterday or all my last 5 tweets. Those kind of dynamic information that you want to pull from 10 different systems, those, even if you're a UI UX developer, you have to know how to use APIs. All right. QA. If you're in QA, you'll be thrown 100 different systems to test, right? You would be using manual testing where you're looking at a screen, clicking buttons, runs like, yep, good, that's manual testing. Would also be doing automated testing where, hey, QA person, here's a web service that we want to move to production, or this is what the developers built and we want to expose it to our customers. Can you quickly test it? QA person is not going to write code again to test APIs, right? Some of them do. There are people who write test scripts to automate their test. But when you're QA and when you're asked to test, you should know what an API is. How do I invoke an API and where do I see the response? Things like that, right? And data analyst too, same deal. You could be like, hey, this system is pushing data into your table. Why is it not there? Then you have to be in a position to say, your API is not really returning the data that you think is getting inserted into the table, right? You want to be able to have that tool in your tool set to be able to, hey, I know what an API is. I can see what you asked of the API and what the API is returning. So that kind of troubleshooting, even administrators, system administrators, even executors for that matter, they need to know what an API is. So it's not a developer only skill set. Everyone, almost everyone in software industry should have some exposure to what an API is. All right. Okay, so I have a question. I think it's a question. Yes. So it sounds like an API is a layer between data and the app. Is that right? Would it be fair to say that most complex apps we are familiar with use an API? Absolutely, yes. It is the face of the code, right? That's what you get to see and interact with. Inside, it could be anything else, but the face, no, is what you interact with. So yes, you're absolutely right, Vanitha. Did that answer your question? Oh, awesome. Okay, so without delving much into it, I'll show you what Postman is, how to use it, things of that nature. Okay, so I'm going to quickly stop sharing my slide and open Postman. So first is installation. This tool you talk about, Vanitha, where do I get it from, right? So simple, postman.com. You can go to the website if you want to follow along, you can, or do it in your free time with the recording. It's fairly simple though. Do you all see my browser? I stopped sharing my slide and it's my browser. Yes, okay. So go to postman.com. This is the kind of screen you'll be welcomed with. Okay, there are two options. One that says sign up for free, or you can download the desktop app. So this is a small differentiation that you got to know about generally all tools, right? Most tools these days. When you sign up for free, what you get is called SaaS, not the rude back talking SaaS, but software as a service, wherein someone hosts the software on someone else's data center and you just get to use. You don't download anything on your computer or your laptop, right? That's called a SaaS product or browser-based product, right? It's not related to Postman, but something good to know, a SaaS product. So you could sign up with your email and it would let you just use Postman just as a website on your browser. That's one way to do it. The other option is traditional, where you just download based on what kind of laptop you have. And that opens up an application like the one I have. So do y'all still see my Postman? All right, so this is software that I downloaded onto my laptop, or I also have an account for the SaaS version of it, meaning I signed up already, so I can just sign in. I'll just show you, they look exactly the same. So when I use the SaaS product, I'm still on my browser, notice that, and I get to use it as though I have it downloaded. So this is the browser version of it, and this is the downloaded application version of it. They look very, very similar. The problem with SaaS, or it's a problem from my point of view, is that you would get new features whether or not you like it and you're ready for it, right? And there'll be a lot of announcements and some kind of promotion for new features, things like that. It just gets a little bit noisy. Where it's helpful is not everyone has the space in their laptop. You could be working off in a public device, say in library, right? In those cases, SaaS is better because you just use your browser, log out, and off you go. So just pick the right version that works in your case. Okay, so I picked the desktop version because it's my personal laptop. I can have this and not have to go through upgrades and things like that. So this is how the tool looks like. It's fairly simple, could get overwhelming. So what we are going to see today is just a general, let's walk through and window shop this tool, okay? So let's look at the top, right? You'll follow my purple mouse or violet mouse, whatever that color is. So we are going to look at workspaces, not API network, reports, or explore, okay? Those are advanced features, so pretend they are not here. On the left-hand side, same way, we are going to look at collections, not API, environments, mark servers, monitors. These are all advanced features, which I've only seen most advanced developers use. Okay, don't overwhelm yourself with all this information. Remember the collections, workspace, and most of the stuff in the middle is what we're going to look at today once you install. So workspace, what's a workspace, right? It's like, so I want to use Postman for work. I want to use it for launch code, and I want to use it for my personal projects, things like that. So I have multiple workspaces. If you are familiar with IDE like IntelliJ or VS Code, think of them as workspace you would use in that context, or projects you open, right? So this is a project. So I would almost draw parallel to, okay, a project in my IDE is very similar to a workspace in Postman. All right, so that's a rough analogy that you can use. So that's what workspace is. It's just segmentation of multiple work streams that you have, right? It's just an organization thing. Collection is, think of it as a folder structure of things. Again, I'm opening my IDE to draw examples here. Say, for example, in source code, you have main and Java, things like that. Same way, collections are just collections within a workspace, right? You want to group similar APIs together so it doesn't all get confusing. So again, it's an organization feature, not API specific, just something so you can keep your work from getting too much like a spaghetti bowl, right? Still, we are in the organization. All right, so where do APIs come into picture here, right? So what I've done is opened up some public APIs. Remember what I said about APIs? It's complex code someone wrote and they exposed it to people who want to use, right? So these are all common APIs. If you just Google for common REST API or general public Postman collection, you will get hundreds of them. I just imported one of it just to show you guys what's an API. So let's look at, I have one open, it's gender. It's a collection about gender. It's from genderize.io. It's a gender detector based on name, right? So if you see, I just opened one API. Let's go through parts of an API, right? So let me quickly, I'm gonna close others. Don't say, Don't say. Don't say. All right. So when I click one, it opens this window that you see, right? Genderized.io, gender detector. It is exactly same as the tree you see on the left. What are these things? Let's go through. So you have this part here. This is the heart and soul of an API, right? Meaning when I want to call the API, where on earth is it? Is it running on my laptop? Is it running on AWS somewhere? Or is someone in Russia running it, right? So it's got to get to somewhere. There's got to be a destination to go to. That is this. This is the URL, what's typically called the API URL, right? So this is usually given by the programmer who wrote the code. In this case, it's a website called genrise.io. They decided, hey, if you want to call my API that I'm just giving you for free, always pass in a name, right? Pass me a name and send it to my address. This is my address, api.genrise.io, and I will give you a response, right? I did not write this code. It's some nice soul from genrise.io that wrote. That is the address / URL and the request parameters, right? So remember, this box right here is your destination. And there is this whole bunch of things that look like words. Without going too much into the weeds, and just, I'll tell you a little backstory. So in way back days of the internet, which is just early 1990s, not too far away, the internet that they had at that time was very siloed, meaning there were like 3 companies maybe that ran modem banks, right? They had thousands of modems in a building somewhere, and you have to download a software. You can't use your browser. You have to download a software and you can get on their modem bank, and you can only use software that they expose. That's how wide our World Wide Web was, early 90s, okay? Which means there was no interoperability. Based on who I connect to, that's all the content I get to see. H&R Block had one, and it was only for people to get help filing tax. So it was very specific, not standardized, and wasn't really an internet. So what happened later, and you all probably know Tim Berners-Lee and all of the standardization that came about, they all decided, okay, if we want to make internet any useful, we all have to agree upon standards, right? So that's when they came up with HTTP, the protocol. If you see a browser and see any address for that matter, see this HTTP and HTTPS, those are all protocols. Those are all standard protocols. So they agreed upon, hey, let's agree on a protocol. And with each protocol, you got to send me a bunch of words so that I know what you're trying to do. If you're doing a GET, you're simply asking information. If you're doing a POST, it means you're sending something to me that I should either save or act upon or do something. So there's a whole bunch of these things. So long story short, everything that you see here is a standard that all of internet, and in this case, all of API providers agreed to participate, so that someone sitting in St. Louis can hit a genrise.io API and get a response without having any knowledge about where exactly this genrise API is running, who's doing it, and how the code is written, right? That is why standards and conventions and all of that's important. And these 2 boxes you see here, that's exactly what they are for. You got to follow the convention that the API developer is following and use it. Yes, question? Lexi, you may want to unmute this person.
Hello?
Yep.
Hi, so my name is Wentai. My question is, so I can see that there are other methods available beyond the get method. So
Right.
there's put and delete and stuff like that. For most APIs that you would make calls to, are you actually allowed to use those other methods, or most
Yes.
of them?
Yes, you are allowed to use, and it must match what the API provider says is the right one. Say, for example, in this one, I have to use get. See this little green thing? Because when I downloaded this API collection just for Postman purpose, the instruction said I have to use get. If I use anything else, it's not going to return anything to me. Let me quickly run it and show it to you so you understand what I am trying to explain. So this case, it's very simple, right? Based on the name you give, this website's going to guess if it's a male or a female. So I tried Mary this morning, and it said it's a female, right? Let's try maybe Mark. It's going to say, hopefully, male with a certain probability. And that's all just me getting this public collection and just tweaking the value. Now, let me try to change this. Let me try to do a put, right? If it lets me change, why not change? So I do a send, and it's saying, you cannot put genderize. So when it eventually hits this website and the destination behind it, the API implementation is like, I did not agree for put. I said get is the convention, that's what you have to follow. There are some websites and there are many APIs that let you do a put and post and many other things behind it. But what you make as a request from your Postman, or even when you write code to call another API, you gotta, your verb has to match what the API provider says is the right verb for this request. This makes sense, Vanitha? All right, okay. Same way with the conventions. Let's try to change name to something that was not in the collection, right? I'm gonna call it name XYZ. When I change here, it also changes here, if you notice. Let me try to hit the API. What happens then? It says, hey, it's missing name parameter, right? So these are the rules and the guardrails that the people who write the API code, someone at genderize.io, right? So those are kind of the standards and conventions. When I write an API and put it out, I want people who use my API to follow. That way I give the correct, accurate response, and their system or the human on the other end does not run into errors. So when you get a collection like these, like I have probably 50 collection, when you get a collection, it will come with the default word that you're supposed to use. Change it, it's not going to break anything. It's a public UI, public API. These are harmless. Play around changing, but most likely you will run into an error saying, hey, you can't call this API with this word. Doesn't work work for me, is what you will see. Okay, so your word and your destination and the parameters that you pass must match what the backend is thinking it's going to get. Okay, this is called the request, and this is called the response, right? So let's hit a right one and say, okay, this is the response that you get, right? What else can I do? So sometimes things may error out, right? You're like, I wanna know a little bit more. Yes, they come with instruction, not English written instruction. So let me open comics, right? It comes with this as the standard convention, which means that's what it's expecting. You could try to change, but it won't work, right? Simply because these are public, they come with recommendation. But if you write enterprise code and try to hit it, you'll run into some error. So it's not instructions as in a user manual, but things that you can interpret if you open in Postman. You can view using other tools too, but I find Postman more human readable than other tools. I'll cover the other tools towards the end. Awesome. So back to the logging. Like, okay, I got this, but I want to know a little bit more, right? Or that one time that we changed stuff on it, right? Name, I send, and I get an error. Like, okay, there's this little thing called console. Think of it as kind of your troubleshooting guide or your log, or a little bit more information than what you see in the middle part. So that's where you would look for diving deeper. These are called logs or console. It's very similar to if you're executing JavaScript and you want to see the console that gives you more error message than what you see on screen, right? Very similar. Say, okay, so this is the one we executed. You get a whole bunch of more information than what you see here. Your response headers, response body, things like that, right? When you eventually get to the troubleshooting phase, just remember there's more than what you see here. You just hit this console button and look for more information, okay? It's sufficient if you know where to look, not exactly how to interpret this massive amount of information. The other feature is, see this little HTML code-like thing? So this is pretty cool. Early 2000 or even up to 2005, 10, if you have to use another person's API, you have to write code, and that code took days to write, right? There was no Postman at that time. There was something called SOAP UI, not very easy to use, right? So you have to write code to call another person API. Say, for example, if you're writing a system that has to call an API that another team wrote, you still have to sit and write code from scratch. The beauty of Postman is you don't have to write code from scratch. It generates code for you, client code, not the server code, not what the folks at generates.io wrote, but you as a person, if you want code, say, for example, you have a HTML website. I'm sure many folks here are familiar with HTML. You all have an exercise where you're able to view source, change stuff on it, things like that, right? So you can have a HTML page, call an API, and display the response, right? Remember, if you have not got to that part of your bootcamp, you will get to that part. We usually write code from scratch, right? It's good for learning purpose, but if you're doing this day in, day out, then it's easy to get the assist of a tool that generates code for you. So curl is one such tool. See all these languages that you can generate code in? You can just click this and get your code. Let's look at JavaScript. XHR is something you all are familiar with. So this is like, oh, just copy paste this. Just copy this, paste it in your HTML. It's going to call this website, get the information, and you can just display that information in a text box or next to a picture, things like that, right? Remember, you can generate code from Postman. If you know the endpoint, and if you know how to invoke the API, what you did manually using clicks and types on this part of Postman, you can generate code for what you just did here, copy it in your test script, copy it in your JavaScript code or HTML code, or even other programming languages like Java. You can generate code here and use it as a starter code, right? And it'll work. You know why it'll work? Because it worked on the screen. Hence, this is a working code. It's not a templatized code. It's code that will almost always work. So that's one option if you're stumped. I have a couple students who started working as interns in Python, right? You can learn Python and figure out how to write API, or you can quickly come here and grab the code and try to make sense out of the 10 or 15 lines. So remember, there is an assist for coding too. for writing client, not writing the backend code. Again, I restated, it's not for Generates IO folks who wrote the backend. This is for us who want to use this information in our front end, be it text script, in our UI UX, things like that. All right. Just remember there is this code portion. Okay, APIs are written in all languages. Yes, the backend is written in all kinds of languages. The front end is written in all kinds of languages. When I say front end, I mean clients who call the API. Yes, all kinds of languages. Almost all languages let you write API code. They let you write API client code both ways. Yes. So that's this piece of the screen. All right. What else? Okay, so this is all the public one. This is something I picked, and you can just Google for this. It'll find you this collection. You can play around with it. The other angle is, hey, I'm a developer. I have code running in my computer, for example. You all may be familiar with the tech jobs exercise, which if you're in unit 2, that's all your assignments are around. So you will have, okay, I have code running in my, where is it? Okay, I have code running here, Vanitha. How do I hit it, right? Like, I'm a developer. I know I have to write screens to see or call my API, but I've not written my HTML code yet, or I've not written my time leaf code yet. Is there any quick way I can test my API? Again, use Postman for that. Fairly simple. So I would just create a collection, just click this press button. That's all I did. Call it tech jobs and said, okay, let me just do it right now for you guys. So I'm going to call it demo, right? I'm going to say, hey, just create this collection and add a new request. See, my tech jobs has 10 different endpoints. Want to get all jobs, want to get all skills, many things like that. So I'm just going to create one where it lists a home page for me. So I'm going to say, hey, I have a new request. If you notice, my URL is empty, right? It's just brand new. And I know where my app's running. It's in localhost 8080. You can even see in the console where your Spring Boot application is running. So you can say, hey, localhost list is my endpoint. So that's one I want to hit, right? And you can give a meaningful name. Say this request is list all jobs request, right? So give any meaningful name that makes sense to you and try to hit it. How do you hit it? You just press the send button. Okay, and it gives me my content. I know this is not like the other public examples. The example I pulled is one that has time leaf backend, meaning it will always return a full HTML. It doesn't have to be HTML. You can return, like the other example you saw, a very simple response. The one that I have running, it just returns a complex HTML. So this example is just to show it's not only for public APIs, the ones that you write yourself, which you all will certainly do, whether as part of your bootcamp assignments, exercise, or at your work. You will have something running somewhere, or even in your local. You just enter the URL, pick the right word, and hit it. Is Postman similar to? I'm not familiar with that tool, Vijay Lakshmi. Let me get back to you. Maybe it's something new and I'm not familiar with. Okay, so Vintai, since you asked, I just want to show how the matching happened. So why did I know list and how did I know get? Because I was a developer who wrote the code. So I know my request mapping is list. And I know it's a get because most request mapping, unless I give the word otherwise, it defaults to get, right? So I know it because I wrote the program and I was able to key them in while I created the new request. But if you get it from a third party or something from the public domain, it comes pre-populated for you. All right, okay. So that's most of this tool. You can kind of just time check, okay. So keep in mind, collection is just like folders and you can have multiple requests. So I can add another request and say, hey, in this case, post 8080 search, and I can say search skills, right? So you can have multiple requests and even non-get requests. I know I've been all about get, but you can add a post too, where it's post jobs and let's add a job, right? How do I know post and the destination, stuff like that? Why is it not post? Yeah, something wonky here. It's supposed to show post. Not sure what's going on. Let's try to say. All right, it changed now. So remember, when you are the developer who wrote the code, you kind of have to kind of key everything in explicitly. But if you're using someone else's API, they all come pre-populated for you. You can try changing, but most likely it will throw an error. Any questions other than what I'm seeing in chat? How I would add a job. I hope I have this running, or maybe not. Yeah, I do not have one running. Let me see. Yeah, I only have listing, but I would be happy to show it to you or record it and share it offline, Vinta. Does it make sense? And yes, I should be able to add a job with a post mapping had I had like a method to do that. I don't have it yet. I have one for listing. I don't have one for adding. I just added it here to show that you can add non-get words. That was the point. All right, perfect. So that's with the collection, and workspace, again, only to segment. If you're working across multiple organizations, you can just have one workspace and dump all your work there. Doesn't matter. Some final parting notes, since we are running close to time, and I want to give some walkthrough downloading again. Yeah, sure. So what you do is go to postman.com. All right, let me log out. I'm logged in, so I have a very different view. I'm going to sign out, and go to postman.com. And download the desktop app. That's what you would do. And if you want public collection, just Google for it. Here's one that I Googled. This is Twitter API, wherein if you have paid to Twitter, again, not all APIs are public. If you have paid Twitter and they've given you the access key, then you are able to use them, right? You can hit them, but it's going to say, hey, good job calling the API, but where's the key that I gave you after you paid me? So it will stop you right there. So remember, not all APIs are free. The way you would look for it is look for public API collection. Oh. It'll throw something to you. So public workspace, that's mostly where you will find all these testing APIs. And especially if you're using the SaaS version, meaning not downloading the software, just using it on the website, it'll immediately take you there. See, I'm not even signed in, but I got here. So just Google for it. I'll even share the direct link, but just search for public API and it'll get you a whole bunch of stuff that you can play around with. Does it answer your question? Okay, I'll give it a moment to answer. All right, okay. Some final note, the tool is cool and all, but when you go to a workplace, these are the things that you have to remember. My slides load. All right, so the SaaS product, like I said, it's not on your laptop, it's hosted somewhere up in the cloud, like in Amazon's cloud or Google's cloud, Microsoft's cloud, not your laptop, someplace else. So be careful about what you put when you're using the SaaS version. Many companies, some of the projects you may be working could be confidential in nature. So be careful about what kind of APIs you put on the SaaS version, because it's almost like company IP, confidential. You could be giving away stuff for free while the company is trying to make money out of it, right? So always be careful, especially if you're using your company account and writing code on your IDE, the Java code, JavaScript code, and going to the SaaS version of Postman and testing it out, right? There's always security breaches happen. Someone could steal your signature and find out, oh, so-and-so company is writing an API with this feature. Hey, let me hurry up and write and steal the customer from them, right? So when you're using the cloud version, watch out for what you put or what kind of APIs you test. And the other one is the tool is mostly free, right? I'm using it for free. You could use it for free if you're just using SaaS version or download it. But your company might have procured a license for it, meaning if someone has got license in your company, then everyone has to get license, right? Different softwares have different terms and conditions of using it. So don't assume it's free. It was free for my personal use. Hence, it must be free to use in the new company that I joined. So don't make that assumption. There are software licensing terms that you could accidentally break. So before you start using in an enterprise setting or in a company setting, always ask if you can download the software and use it for free, okay? Cool software, use it on your laptop. It's free for personal use and for learning purposes as students. But when you start a job, be mindful of what version of the software you use. When do we want to see our own API code as you did? Is there a use case? So yes, Anjana, the code that I have is my LC 101 assignment. The last 3 assignments, I think, all of them are around tech jobs. I believe that's still the theme for this cohort or cohorts this year. So when one would use is, for example, or even my lift off students had some flavor of that going on. So one person's writing the code, another person's writing the UI, and someone else is writing business case, right? So if I'm the developer writing code and I do not care how it looks on the HTML page, or I do not want to wait until the person who's writing HTML is done with their work so I can see the response, then I would just quickly open up Postman and see, okay, if someone hits my API, this is the response it's giving. So my job here is done. If it doesn't show up in the UI, it's probably something wrong with the way the UI is calling, or meaning the way the front-end developer coded to call my API, right? That's one valid use case for you as students to use Postman, wherein you don't have to wait for other developers to finish their job to see how your REST endpoint or your Spring controller or your Spring Boot work is performing. You can just test it quickly using Postman and be done with it and move on to the next thing. I know you can do it using browser too, like hit the same URL in browser to still work, but browser's very limited, meaning you can only hitting a post endpoint on browser is super complicated. You're better off using Postman, right? So as students, especially as LC 101 students, your best use case for using Postman is, I wrote a Spring Boot project, I wrote a REST controller. How do I test it without browser? Or how do I test a post endpoint, right? Postman it is. Anjana, does that answer, was that your question? All right, perfect. Three other things before we part. Credentials and sharing. One thing that I did not show you guys is there's this little thing called authorization, right? So if you hit it, like I said, not all APIs are free to use. People are doing these things to make money. Many times they'll kind of trap you into like, hey, look at this free API I'm offering, start using for your company. You start over relying on it, and then they flip the switch on you. And it's like, you know what, guys, we kind of want to monetize it. So every 10 calls you make, you're going to pay me some money, right? How do they gate it for paid users, non-paid users? They expect you to have password to call them. Who gives the password? They give the password. That's how they make sure only authorized people are able to call their APIs. That way they can make money out of it, right? So the authorization piece, if you look at the TIE, basic auth's a good example. There are other things which are like, don't worry about it. Look at basic auth. That probably makes more sense. Username and password, right? So you could type in your username and password, right? And you could potentially share credentials with someone you didn't mean to. One feature of this is you can share your collection, right? For example, I can just go here, say, where's my tech jobs? Okay, this could be a API that I have locked behind username and password, and accidentally I can hit this and I can export. It'll create a file for me, which I can give it to someone. Say, for example, hey, Lexi, take this file, open it in your Postman, and you can also hit your local endpoint like I did, right? So that she doesn't have to type in the verb and the endpoint and all the parameters. I could just do all the work and then pass it to Lexi. What have I accidentally done in that case? I have given my username and password to her. So be mindful when you hit export or when you do this sharing business. If I can, there's a lot. So let me, okay, there is a share thing somewhere here. So if you share, you could accidentally share credentials. Again, that's one thing you want to be very mindful of, especially in the work setting. You don't want to be that intern who accidentally leaked a company password, right? So that's one thing you want to be mindful. There are other tools. Postman is not the only one, although it's most widely used, right? So SOAP UI is one, Swagger Hub is one, and I know Vijay said Insomnia. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe it is a tool that I'm just not familiar with. So there are other tools. So in an interview setting, if someone asks these tools, you can give an informed and intelligent answer saying, I'm not used SOAP UI, but I'm very familiar with Postman and I've learned it, right? It's not just with this tool. Anytime, it's always good to know, are there comparable tools? Because the tech space is so crowded. Every line item, there's like 10 different tools and not everyone can learn all tools. So always, it's a good skill to know what comparable tools are there and one that you're familiar with or one that you're exposed to. And Postman has very good learning website. It's just, these have self-guided exercises ranging from 30 minutes to few hours. You can learn it at your own pace. If you want to practice for an interview or just have the skill so you can add it to your resume, just go to Postman Learning Center and run few self-paced courses, just the beginner courses. That itself will give you a huge leg up in terms of being familiar with the tool, what it's used for, and how can I leverage it for my projects or for my internship or assignments, things like that. So, and of course, there's a million YouTube videos that you can look up to, but Postman is very useful. It comes with all the content you need to learn, hands-on content, that too, not just watching videos. So that's a good resource to go back to if you want to pursue learning more about Postman. All right. So that's it. Hey, look at it. It's 6 o'clock. So question time. Oh, very good alternates. Yep. Mika, thank you. I'll take a look at it. Interesting. I have never seen it. Perfect, guys. I know it's not your class day, it's outside of your schedule, so I truly appreciate you taking 1 hour of your precious Wednesday evening. I know everyone's busy with 100 different things, and this is prime dinner time. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll share my contact with Lexi, and if anyone wants to reach out, whether it's Postman or in general mentoring, learning, I love doing this stuff. So hit me up. I'm on Slack and most of the launch code cohorts. So my name is Vanitha Kumar. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your attention.
Yeah, thank you again to everyone that came through and joined us tonight. I have about 8 folk that have filled out the survey for tonight, so please make sure that you are going back and filling that out. We really appreciate it, and we'll continue to use this feedback to improve the sessions we'll offer in the future. But Vanitha, also thank you for hosting it tonight. I know that this was really helpful for a lot of the students that attended, so thank you for your time, and we will see y'all hopefully in the next session that we have like this. So I hope that you'll have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Lexi. Thanks for the opportunity. Y'all have a good evening, folks.